Hi, this is your host Swapnil Bharti and welcome to TFiR Let's Talk. And today we have with us Lukas Gentele, co-founder and CEO of Loft Lab. Lukas, first of all, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Tell me, what are you announcing at KubeCon?
Yeah, we have actually another open source project in the pipeline, which has been in the making for quite some time. Since we're in the multi-tenancy space, one thing that is very important to users is policies. And policies, similar to, multi-tenancy itself, is something really complicated today. And we're hoping to make that a lot easier with a new open source project.
Talk about this open source project. What is it called? What does it do?
The project is essentially called jsPolicy. And jsPolicy is really an attempt to make policies understandable. Because if you're looking at current policy engines like Open Policy Agent and KuberNetes, they're really designed for operators, right? You have to formulate your policies in very complicated languages like Rego or with a lot of YAML code, which may have advantages in certain cases, but it has one clear disadvantage, and that is understandability. If a policy denies your action in a Kubernetes cluster, and you, as a developer, would look at the policy, I'm pretty sure today you're not able to understand what that policy is actually doing, right? With jsPolicy, we're bringing a JavaScript execution engine, and that's Google's JavaScript execution engine that also powers your browser, or pretty much every web browser. We're bringing that to policies because JavaScript is by far one of the most popular languages out there, and developers understand JavaScript very well. And operators should not have a problem expressing their policies in either Rego or JavaScript. So that's essentially what jsPolicy is about.
Will there be some overlap between jsPolicy and OPA?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an overlap between Open Policy Agent and jsPolicy because you can do the same things with them. I think the goal is just a little different. It's kind of like AI and explainable AI, right? What we're trying to do is not too much focus on the actual policy itself and rather understanding the policy that you're implementing there. So I think there's some opportunity down the road to actually merge the projects or do something together. I think there is a lot of projects in CNCF which do the same thing, right? Same with DevSpace, right? There is 50 other developer tools out there for Kubernetes. And I don't think that's a problem. I think each company has very individual needs and they may have a different focus, right? And if they care about policies being written by everybody and understood by everybody, that may be a different focus than observability of these policies, which, is clearly better covered with Open Policy Agent today.
What kind of plans do you have for both vCluster and the jsPolicy in terms of managing? Will it remain a company project? What is the governance? How you will attract, contributors to the project?
Yeah, I think we've been pretty successful at, getting traction for open source projects, DevSpace and Kiosk so far. I think DevSpace has over 2,000 GitHub stores and a lot of active users, contributing issues and even features. And the same for Kiosk. Kiosk doesn't even have a landing page and already, hitting almost 600 GitHub stores, which is crazy considering it just has a short README, right? And I think if you're creating something valuable, especially in the space that we're in, people are going to find your solution and people are excited to join you on that mission. Ultimately, I think, especially for those two projects, we're trying to gain as much traction for them to eventually even make them a CNCF sandbox project. I mean, that would be wonderful because I see a lot of power in this open governance model that CNCF is providing. It has a lot of benefits for the end users of such an open source project. And obviously it provides a very stable framework for operating open source project for the maintainers as well and for all the contributors. So I think pretty much every project in our space that is open source should kind of target towards actually handing over things to CNCF once it is mature enough. I don't think they want to deal with, the very early days, the first, 6 months or so, when the project is still changing a lot. But at a certain point, it just makes sense to hand over the governance.
Can you also talk about the integration of these open source projects, vCluster or the jsPolicy? So, because as we were talking earlier, the end goal is to make things easier for customers, not to deal with two separate components again.
Yeah, so essentially, so the way that virtual clusters work, and our vCluster implementation in particular, is you're essentially running a vCluster inside a namespace. So you're enabling the developer to spin up that. If you have access to a namespace today, which is the current multi-tenancy model, and you're limited, right? If you're not limited by that, and if you're fine with your namespace, even better, right? No need for adding an extra layer. But if you're needing virtual clusters, you can deploy a virtual cluster in that namespace, which is basically just a regular application running in that namespace. And then you're connecting to that application, and it behaves like a Kubernetes cluster. It actually, spins up your pods, whatever you're creating in there. And that means you're creating things in the end in the underlying shared cluster, right? So there is a need for these policy restrictions to be applied to the underlying namespace. And I think we're trying to make that as easy as possible for platform teams to be confident enough, to open up Kubernetes to 1,000 or 2,000 engineers in an enterprise.
Lukas, thank you so much for taking time today and talk about these open source projects. And I look forward to talk to you again. Thank you.
Sure, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.